guys, tonight we wander into a place that probably shouldn't exist. You're standing in the echoing hush of an ancient archive, somewhere in museum and dream. The air tastes like dust and copper, the only sound is the hush of paper breathing. You probably won't survive this kind of curiosity, at least not unchanged. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, drop your location and your local time in the comments below. I love seeing where everyone's listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're here because something called to you, a whisper about a chapter that was never meant to be found. You reach out, fingertips brushing the spine of a book that hasn't felt human warmth for centuries. The cover flakes like old bark, and beneath it, faint Hebrew letters curl into symbols that seem to shift when you blink. Historians still argue whether any forgotten chapter truly exists or whether it's just a medieval hoax born from wild imagination and wine-fueled scribes. But the truth is slipperier than that. You can feel it, can't you? That slow thrum behind your ribs, like the heartbeat of something ancient waiting to be heard again. A lantern swings above you, throwing pale circles of light over scrolls lined up like sleeping monks. Each one bears a label, Numbers, Exodus, Kings, and then nothing. There's a narrow gap where something's missing, a sliver of silence between names. You lean closer. Even the cobwebs seem to avoid that space like they know better. A librarian once joked that silence has weight, and tonight you believe him. One mainstream fact you can hold on to: there were indeed many texts considered scripture in the early centuries that didn't make it into the modern Bible. The Book of Enoch, the Gospel of Thomas, the Shepherd of Hermas, they all once vied for a place in the canon. Councils later labeled them useful but not divine. Still, copies survived, buried under desert sands or hidden in monastery walls. So the idea of a missing piece isn't as far-fetched as Sunday school might suggest. You brüstust from a label Codex Noster. The ink is faded, but when your breath hits it, the letters darken as if inhaling your curiosity. The parchment beneath smells faintly of myrrh and iron. Someone somewhere spent a lifetime copying these words by hand, maybe praying with each line. You imagine the scribe hunched over, candle guttering low, whispering a prayer that his work would outlive him. The fringe rumor says he added one chapter too many, a vision so controversial the church supposedly erased his name. Whether that's fact or fantasy, no one agrees. You roll the scroll open, careful noted tier it. The ink shimmers faintly, almost alive. The opening line seems to breathe, and the light spoke, saying, "Do not forget the silence from which I came." You freeze. That verse doesn't belong to anything you've ever read. It's not from Genesis, not Isaiah, not any apocrypha you recall. Agentle dreht in your stomach, but curiosity keeps your hands steady. You read on. Outside the archive's window, thunder stirs. Maybe it's imagination, but you swear the storm rolls in sync with the rhythm of the words. There's something poetic, almost defiant, in how this lost chapter introduces light not as God's creation, but as God's equal. That's the sort of heresy that could get you branded, exiled, or worse back in the 4th century. No wonder they buried it. Historians still argue whether ancient scribes intentionally removed passages that portrayed divine forces as dual rather than singular. It's one of those debates where every scholar insists they're right, yet no one dares publish the full findings. You take a breath and whisper the line aloud. The walls seem to listen. Somewhere between that whisper and the next heartbeat, the air cools. You half expect a security guard to appear, but instead you hear a flutter, the soft turning of a page from across the room, though you're alone. A yoke flickers through your mind. My bits use the ghost of the decimal system coming back to hound you. But humor doesn't fully dispel the tension. You've stepped into something alive, a story that's been waiting for someone reckless enough to look. You imagine how the story reached here. Maybe it was smuggled from Alexandria before the library burned, wrapped in linen and hidden inside a merchant's chest. Maybe a monk in the Syrian desert copied it by moonlight, fearing that even angels might be listening. You picture centuries of dust and silence compacted into this one moment, your fingertips, their ink, the brief crossing of time. There's a note scribbled in Latin at the margin, rough handwriting like someone wrote in a hurry, not for the council, for the heart. You can almost see the trembling hand behind those words, the awareness that discovery could mean destruction. Scholars have found similar marginalia in real manuscripts, warnings, prayers, secret confessions. One fringe theory even claims that marginal notes were how forbidden theology survived, hidden in plain sight. You find that strangely beautiful, like faith encoded in the spaces between breaths. The next line of the text is half faded. You angle the parchment toward the lantern until it glows faintly gold, and he who listened was not alone, for silence itself bore witness. You can't help but grin. That's either deep metaphysics or the world's first poetic way of saying someone else heard it too. As you keep reading, something strange happens. You realize that every phrase seems to anticipate your thought, almost as if the words are aware of being rediscovered. They bend around your expectations, twist your understanding of Scripture's tone. You remember how Sunday stories felt, absolute, polished, unquestionable. This, by contrast, feels raw, human, unsettling. The chapter speaks like a dialogue rather than decree. A sudden draft sweeps through the isle. You turn, and the lantern's flame tilts sideways. The room feels less like a library now and more like a confessional, except no priest, no booze, just you and the long silence of the past. There's a half-joking thought. If your phone battery dies right now, you'll have to explain to a janitor why you're reading heretical scripture in the dark. But you push it aside. The page draws you deeper, promising answers it might never give. The ink shifts again, words reforming subtly as the flame flickers. You blink, and for one terrifying second, a new line appears where none was before. Reader, be warned, the silence remembers. You whisper the words, testing them. The echo feels too long, too heavy. The floor beneath creaks, or maybe it sighs. You stand there, realizing this isn't just about theology, it's about control, memory, and who decides what stories survive. The missing chapter, real or imagined, becomes a mirror for your own hunger to know. And though part of you wants to roll the scroll back up and pretend you saw nothing, another part leans closer, heart steady, eyes wide. Somewhere between ink and silence, you sense the first pulse of revelation, like the heartbeat of a secret the world forgot to bury deep enough. You linger in that dusty stillness, the lost line echoing in your mind like a whisper that doesn't know how to end. The scroll rests half unrolled, fragile and trembling in the low lantern light, and for a heartbeat, you think you see your reflection on its surface, not on glass but ink. You tell yourself it's just the shine of the oil lamp, but deep down, you're not sure. You lean closer, nose almost touching parchment that smells like a mix of cedar, ash, and something faintly sweet. Old myrrh, maybe. They feels heavy with stars waiting to exhale. You pull your phone from your pocket, the glow cutting through the dim. The absurdity hits you. Here you are, using a 21st century flashlight to inspect a page older than every cathedral you've ever seen. A part of you almost laughs, another part feels like you're trespassing, like some cosmic librarian is watching you from the stacks. Historians still argue whether the so-called Codex Noster ever truly existed, or whether it's a mistranslation of another manuscript discovered near Antioch. But the cataloging gap in several 10th century inventories is real, and for the fringe-minded researcher, that gap screams louder than proof. You lower the phone and let your eyes adjust again. The light shifts across the table, revealing a smear of darker ink along the bottom margin. Not handwriting this time, just a faint trace of a thumbprint. Whoever touched it last had left a piece of themselves here. You place your own thumb beside it, almost as if to shake hands across time. The print feels faintly greasy under your fingertip, and you think about the person who left it. Maybe a monk, maybe a thief, maybe someone like you who wanted answers more than permission. You tug the scroll open another inch. The writing changes, denser now, the strokes sharper, the hand faster. You can almost sense the scribe's anxiety in the pen marks. The lines read, and in the silence, Light asked of Shadow, "Why do you hide?" And Shadow said, "Because you have forgotten my name." You mute the words slowly, like testing a foreign prayer. It's poetry, but not like the Psalms. It's older, earthier, the kind of language that belongs around campfires, not altars. You pause and whisper, "Forgotten Name, a chill runs down your arms." What kind of theology is that, Light forgetting Shadow's name? The thought isn't entirely alien. You remember reading that early Hebrew mysticism sometimes treated darkness not as evil, but as the original canvas on which creation was painted. Without shadow, light can't define itself. Historians still debate how deeply this dual symbolism influenced early faith traditions. Some say it's heresy born from Zoroastrian influence, others argue it's simply metaphor misunderstood by later translators. Either way, it's dangerous philosophy for parchment. You find yourself pacing now, the floorboards creaking beneath your steps. The air hums with old static, like the silence after a bell stops ringing. You think of the scribes again, men who spent lifetimes writing words they didn't always understand, hoping not to anger the God they were describing. The mainstream fact is, scribal transmission was an act of worship as much as scholarship. Every time a scribe wrote the divine name, he was supposed to pause, wash his hands, sometimes even pray. Some traditions claimed that if a scribe made one mistake in copying the tetragrammaton YHWH, he had to destroy the entire page. Imagine that, hours of devotion, a rest for a single stroke of ink. You glance back at the line, Light asked of Shadow. The divine name doesn't appear anywhere in this section. Maybe that's why it survived. Or maybe it never belonged to the same family of texts at all. A fringe theory flickers in your memory, the idea that early versions of Genesis once contained parables about creation as conversation, not command. In that version, creation wasn't "let there be light," but light. Do you remember? You smile despite yourself. If you ever quoted that in Sunday school, you'd probably get politely asked never to return. The lantern flickers. You kneel, turning up the wick, and for a brief moment the flame catches a reflection on something beneath the table. A small metal tag, maybe bronze, wedged between the floorboards. You pry it loose. It's stamped with 3 letters, ADV. No year, no name. You whisper, "Advance, adversary, Advent." The possibilities rattle in your skull like coins. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's everything. You tuck the tag into your pocket, then notice a faint indentation in the parchment, like the shadow of another page that once lay on top. You shift the lamp sideways and watch the grooves emerge under slanted light. The lines form shapes, maybe letters, but in reverse, as if someone wrote a note on a sheet above it and the pressure left ghosts behind. You squint, tracing with your fingertip. A single phrase surfaces, written backward, kept the ink alive. You sit back slowly. That's not a translation note. It's a play. Maybe even a code. There's a myth among manuscript hunters, a half-joking superstition that ink remembers intent. That if someone writes a line in faith or fear, some emotional trace clings to the pigment itself. You'd never believed that before. Now you're not so sure. Your eyes drift to the lantern's glow, and for a second it seems to dim in rhythm with your breathing. The silence deepens, pressing around you. Somewhere above, the building groans as if shifting in its sleep. You try to shake it off with a joke under your breath, something about haunted libraries needing better air conditioning, but it falls flat in the thick air. The text continues, each line stranger than the last, and silence said to light, I kept your secrets when the world began to sing. You stopped here. The phrasing stirs a faint echo of Genesis again, in the beginning, but this time it's not creation emerging from silence. It's silence itself speaking as a witness. That flips the entire story on its head. You remember that in some early Christian sects, the idea of Sophia, divine wisdom, being female, was once mainstream. Maybe this lost passage personifies silence the same way, a witness, a mother, an equal. You grin at the thought of a divine feminine whispering behind the official text, erased but not forgotten. A soft scrape interrupts you. The hair on your arms lisps. You freeze listening. Somewhere in the dark aisle behind you, paper slides against wood. Ten noting. Use the pulse in your ears. You turn slowly, holding your phone like a makeshift flashlight. Rows of manuscripts stare back at you, rows and rows, patient and unmoved. You exhale and mutter, probably the air vents. Their vents don't answer. You laugh nervously, because what else can you do? 3 yolks per night, remember. You're determined to hit quota, even if the audience is a few ghosts and a century of dust. You roll the scroll fortier. The parchment crackles. The next section begins mid-sentence, and he who listened wrote what he saw, though his eyes were blind. That paradox sits heavy in your mouth. A blind witness writing what he sees. Maybe it's metaphor, maybe it's memory. Historians still argue whether such language belonged to early mystical sects, Gnostics perhaps, who believed enlightenment came through inner vision rather than miracles. You pause again, realizing the ink here is thicker, as if rewritten over older letters. Someone, sometime later, reinforced these words, chose to make this line endure. You trace the bold stroke of blind, and the parchment feels almost warm. A thought slinks through your mind, quiet but persistent. What if the forgotten chapter isn't lost because it was destroyed, but because it keeps rewriting itself to whoever finds it? Maybe that's why the handwriting shifts, why the text feels alive. Maybe each reader adds a piece unknowingly, the same way dreamers rewrite dreams by dreaming them. You stand in the flickering half-light, staring at the ancient script and your trembling reflection in the lantern glass. The silence doesn't feel empty anymore. It feels expectant, like a held breath before revelation. Somewhere deep in your chest, the heartbeat you heard earlier stirs again, steady, echoing something older than fear. You realize you're not just writing a forgotten chapter, you're rewriting it.